Hello, and welcome to the Hashira Half Hour. I am your leader of the Tankana shippers. I'm Hannah, and as always, I am joined by Bryan and Emily.
What up, homies? It's your lovely blue-haired boy, closest related to Dobby from My Hero Academia, even though we're talking about Demon Slayer today. So if I bring the flamey vibes, don't you worry about it. I am just doing the Dobby dance in my home.
Oh my god.
I love that for you, Bryan. Hi guys, it's Emily. Today, I don't know. I'm feeling pretty lucky. We don't talk about this a lot, but my boy Tommy just walked in with some flowers for me. So that's making me pretty happy.
That's so
nice.
cute.
I know this is a podcast, but thanks, Tommy.
Good job, Tom.
Very good. Good boy. We love good boy vibes in this house.
We sure do. Oh, that's so cute, honestly. Cool. Well, today we are discussing episode 25, Tsuguko Kanao Tsuyuri. We're almost done with season 1, which is wild. I can't believe that we're almost to the end here. But diving right into it, this episode does open with Tanjiro working very hard towards mastering total concentration breathing constant, while Inosuke and Zenitsu continue to just kind of watch him, but not take any action. So I don't know about y'all, but I was kind of surprised they're still just kind of watching. Are you surprised that the two boys have not started that training back up, even though Tanjiro is clearly like taking those steps to improve and is starting to get a little bit better than them?
I don't know if surprised is exactly the right word. I think that their egos got a little bit bruised. And if we know anything about these three boys so far, it's that Tanjiro is able to kind of overcome, even if he ever feels that way. And I don't really think that he does. You know, I think that he just views everything as like a learning opportunity, even if it's something that would be humbling for him. But the other two have a deeper sense of like pride and ego. So I just think that their egos got bruised. So no, I'm not necessarily surprised that they're still sulking a little bit, that they got like beaten up by little girls. But they also had like major injuries, and they were already, I think, a little bit behind Tanjiro in recovering from some of those injuries anyway, because of the severity of them. So not surprised, but I do think that when they catch wind of how much further ahead he's getting, that's going to be another ego trip for them. And so they're going to want to catch up.
Yeah, I think that, it's not that I'm not surprised by it, because I know that they were like down in the dumps already, but also the main thing here is I don't think they've seen where he is yet. Like, it takes understanding of where someone else is at to then form jealousy. So unless you know how far behind you are, you're never going to be motivated enough to do so. I mean, it's not good to compare yourself to other people. Let's make that clear. Don't do this if you're listening to it. You are your own goals. You are your own measurements. But it's still definitely a feeling that all humans get, 2D or not, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting dynamic between the three of them as they figure their little lives out here. But I have to say, I don't usually like training arcs, but this one has been really motivating me to consistently show up at the gym every day. So thanks, Tanjiro, because woo, I'm showing up every day and I'm proud of myself for that. But Zenitsu and Inosuke do eventually realize that they need to keep up with Tanjiro, as he is able to break the first gourd that he was working towards with his total concentration breathing. Nothing like a little bit of competitiveness to get you back in the game. We have spent quite some time with the three of them now. How do you think their friendship has progressed, and how do you think the situation is affecting their bond?
I think with this one, right, their bond has been kind of formed, right? They've gone through, if you know about like the phases of an organization or the phases of a team, right? They were like first in the honeymoon phase, like, oh, I have friends. And then they like started to get into each other's issues, or like Zenitsu's kind of annoying. Inosuke is just all over the place, and Tanjiro is trying to be the mom of them. And now they're finally getting to that like even point where they're actually working together. I feel like this point is where they're starting to figure out each other's strengths and weaknesses and how they can compensate for each other. So I think at this point, right, they really are, doing the nitty gritty work of relationship relationship building and becoming a team. I think this is kind of that moment where we can say, like, this is the Ganpachiro Kamaboko squad.
Woo!
I think so too. We've spent a lot of time with the three of them over the course of this entire season, and we're beginning to wind down a little bit. But they've fought together and they've protected people together, and each of them in their own ways have found natural moments of leadership too. So it's like, I think we know who we think that the leader is, but the truth is they actually are pretty good at communicating and organizing a strategy that's going to work between the three of them. Even if it's a little bit clunky at the very beginning, it's already getting better. I think we're seeing them work effectively as a team. And so I'm excited to see them continue to grow and work effectively as a team. But that means that they need to stay on like a level playing field. So they're definitely going to want to all keep up and compete with each other. And yes, be best friends, but also be each other's rivals so that they can encourage one another to be their best.
Yeah, and I think it's really important, like what Tanjiro said at the end of last episode, where, you know, Shinobu asked him if he was lonely because he was doing it by himself. And he was like, they'll eventually come around and then I'll get to teach them. And I thought that was just like really sweet. And I think that just, again, goes along with like the three of their characters. And it shows just how much he cares about them as well, even though, you know, they've been through a lot together already, but they have a long ways to go for sure. So we see Shinobu come up and start teaching Inosuke and Zenitsu what Tanjiro has been working on. I found it quite interesting that she was able to individualize her approach to match the energy of Zenitsu and Inosuke perfectly. I thought it was quite a funny moment, you know, like she's like, Inosuke, are you sure you can't do this? This is like child's play. And of course, all she has to do is like hold Zenitsu's hand and he is bright red, quite literally. But it also, in my opinion, kind of spoke to Shinobu's character to be able to read people so easily. So do you think that's kind of a special ability on her side of things, that she's able to tailor her interactions to best help the person that she's working with at that given moment?
I think that it's something she's probably had to learn over the course of a long time, because we're going to get into it a little bit later in this episode, but we see that she hasn't always really been exactly like this. You know, everything we've seen of Shinobu so far is like relatively like mild-mannered, soft-spoken, a little bit vague, and maybe kind of weaving some lies into things that effortlessly sound like the truth coming out of her mouth. I think that in order to take on a persona like that, given how different what we see her earlier or her real personality is like, she has to be able to read people. And that's part of, I think, becoming a Hashira as well. Like, yes, they're expert fighters. They are experts at taking down a number of demons, and that's why they've risen the ranks. But also they wouldn't be able to do that if they didn't have a deep understanding of like human nature too. So yes, I think it's a special ability. I don't know if it's something inherent though, rather than something that she had to train herself to learn for a long time.
I mean, as RuPaul says, right? Reading is what? It's fundamental. In this situation, right? Like, I think, as Emily said, right, like you need to be able to have an understanding of people in order to rise the ranks to Hashira, right? Whether it's through taking on Tsugukos and being able to train other people, or it's just understanding the crowd that you're working in. I think with Shinobu specifically, though, she's able to read people a little bit better because of the way she fights, right? We talked earlier about how she's a poison user. With that being said, right, you know how to use it and you need to know when to use it. And I'm sure, you know, maybe there have been missions where, you know, there were humans wanting to become demons or like plotting with demons, maybe, I don't know, but she's had to probably use it on a human at some point, I'm assuming, in her time on the earth. So, you know, she's got to be able to figure out like who the enemy is and be able to see through things. So it's really just kind of who she's become. I mean, butterflies are very much so unnoticed, but beautiful and can be very quiet, aren't aggressive, but nonetheless, they are still part of the animal kingdom and still eat something, right? So she's got to be able to eat and fly.
Wow, that's just a perfect description of Shinobu. Good job, Bryan. Round of applause for that. We love Shinobu in this house. But we're gonna move on to Kanao, because the name of the episode, after all, is her name. I'm not going to try and say it again because I had to practice saying the name of the episode a few times. But I have to say, as a manga reader, I was really excited to revisit her backstory. I find her to be a very interesting character, and we get introduced to her flipping a coin and learn that she was essentially enslaved as a child and like horribly abused, had just pretty much an awful life. I felt that seeing this backstory made her character make sense to me, because growing up like that, like, might cause you to become quiet and not be able to speak for yourself. You know, she probably kind of learned that she couldn't really say anything, and that can turn you into the person that she is, that we have seen. So what do you think of this introduction of Kanao, and how does it set up her character in your opinion?
It's funny because I actually just finished Demon Slayer: The Flower of Happiness, and they had a story that related to Kanao and Aoi, and it talked about the coin and stuff. So I'm really excited to talk about this as well. But first thing I want to introduce was the sound design that was chosen. If you look back into it, there was the point where she was like, there's a point where I no longer felt pain, and it was the rope snapping.
Yeah.
And that was really very significant for her character. I feel like it definitely set her up to be you know, a very black and white character. I think it's very interesting with the coin specifically, because it definitely gives her that, you know, binary to work off of, but also gives her kind of that Two-Face vibes where she's, you know, leaving it up to fate, as the world usually is. Most things are up to fate. So I think it's definitely a very interesting and vague, somewhat mysterious, right? I feel like all of the, you know, with Shinobu being her, you know, master, I definitely think it's a very solid representation of who she's trained from.
Yeah. There's something about like these tragic backstories for almost every anime character that exists, and something again that Demon Slayer does really well is encapsulate it very, very quickly. You know, so we get this backstory and it is bite-sized, but that doesn't make it any less devastating. Like Bryan said, we see this moment where there was like a snap and things just changed for her. And how awful for that to happen to such a young child. And to be left feeling so powerless that even when she is, you know, kind of welcomed by these other characters that we'll get to in a second, she still feels incapable of making her own decisions and feeling safe and protected. I think even, I imagine that takes quite a long time. So it's very fitting that she would then want to become a Tsugoku to the Hashira to help protect and defend other people that are defenseless. I think it's a good introduction.
Yeah, I think that having that kind of childhood, it's like, no matter what happens, even if you don't feel pain again, that's kind of like in your soul, is like what you've been through. And I think Kanao's backstory isn't talked about enough, because it's, like you said, Emily, like so many characters have extremely devastating backstories, like pretty much all of them do. Hers is just as devastating, and I don't see it talked about, because it's not like she's suffering at the hands of a demon like so many do. She doesn't really experience that. She experienced suffering at the hands of humans, which is different, because a lot of people that suffered at the hands of humans in the story end up a demon. So I think it's very interesting to kind of see that flip side of things, for sure. But we finally get to meet Shinobu's late sister, Kane. I found the introduction of the coin to be quite interesting. On one hand, I think Kane meant well, because it was like a slow way to help teach her to think for herself, and it was kind of a start for that. But on the other hand, I kind of agreed with Shinobu. She was very like against it. She, like Emily's kind of mentioned a few times, she's kind of different in this backstory than she is now that we see her in today's like time. She's kind of mentioning that it might do more harm than good. Do you think Kane's introduction of the coin was a smart choice? And would you have changed anything if you were in the Kocho sisters' shoes?
I think that the coin was one of the only ways that they were going to be able to get her to make a decision, because it was a very simple concept, simple enough for a small child, which she still was. And then, you know, like the coin, is congruent with the idea of like fate. Like, which is it going to be? Like, it is in my hands, but it's also not. And so I think that took a little bit of pressure off of Kanao, and that's probably why she leaned into it so heavily. Would it have probably been better to slowly like wean her off of the coin and, you know, assist a little bit more independence? Probably. I'm not a parent myself, and neither were either of the two sisters. I think that they were doing their best, and it's really easy to like sit here and be like, they could have parented this child that they took in a little bit better. But I also think though that at some point it is something that she's going to have to learn for herself. So maybe, but I don't fault either of them for offering this as an option. I think it was the best thing they could have done for her in the moment.
Yeah, kind of tagging off of that, right? Like they brought up, like Shinobu was like frustrated because she wouldn't even eat and her stomach was grumbling, right? Like she wouldn't talk to them. So like, you know, you if you can't get through them verbally, if you're and they're not even talking to you, you're just talking to bricks at that point. So really the coin, not my fave idea, right? Because then again, right, like you're like, oh well, I'm flipping a coin and this person's dying on the ground. Sorry, coin said I can't save you. Bye. But like also in the same breath, right? Like I guess it at least gives an outcome, right? And then she can like scurry away as the person's dying on the floor, right? Like I guess it's all you could do. And sometimes that's sometimes that's the best thing is like, you know, even if it's just a drop in the bucket, you know, the drop is better than nothing, right?
Well, I think it'll also, just to tag back off of that, help her to learn, like once there's like excitement maybe for one option over the other, then it's like, oh, I don't actually need to use this coin kind of thing. Like it's giving like magic conch shell vibes. Can I have something to eat? No. Can I have something to eat? No. And it's, but you get what I mean? It's like at some point it's like, okay, like, do I need to be like asking this inanimate object for the thing that I now am consciously aware that I want?
Yeah.
But at the beginning, I don't think that she is consciously aware of what she wants because she's just like so traumatized that just being alive is enough of a burden. So it'll come with time, hopefully. And maybe we're just not there yet. She's still young.
Yeah, I think it's apparent that Shinobu and Kane just didn't really know what they were doing and they were trying their best. And, you know, I think that definitely Shinobu disagreed with the choice, but she's also gone along with it because Kanao still has that coin and Kane's not around anymore. So I definitely agree. I think that it was something that probably needed to be done, but maybe she needs to be weaned off of it, which maybe we're getting the opportunity for another character to help her with that. Coming soon next episode. Moving on, this is something that I missed the first time watching this, mostly because I don't notice little things here and there, but I found it extra interesting that the backstory ended with Kane's line. I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the exact line that she says, but she essentially says like, someday you'll fall in love with a boy and he's going to help you learn how to follow your heart. And it faded right into Tanjiro speaking and made an emphasis to focus on him. So how do you think this sets up those two characters? And do you think Tanjiro is going to be an important aspect of Kanao's story?
This show in foreshadowing couldn't be this show.
No way. It's so mid. There's no plot to this story.
LOL. But yeah, no, obviously, I mean, that's like a direct, like, you'll meet someone one day, and then that person literally starts talking. Of course it's him, right? Of course, Tanjiro's the child of prophecy we've heard about, right? He's the child of fire. He's the child of a spark. Like, this is the kid who's going to change someone. And if anyone's going to break through to Kanao, it's this kid. Like, literally, he like made the heart of a demon pure in their final moments when he didn't step on papers. Like, and he had broken legs and broken ribs at that point. Like, if anyone can get this person to like find the confidence in themselves, it's Tanjiro. And I'm, you know, nothing more than ecstatic to see what else he can do to change the rest of the world around him.
This show loves to foreshadow, and it's been fun to go back and watch it again. You know, knowing some things that happen a little bit further down the line, even just into like the second season that we're going to watch here soon and discuss. It's interesting to go back and pick up on things that I just didn't catch the first time.
Yeah.
And I think that this was a very intentional camera direction. I'm excited to see this relationship between Kanao and Tanjiro and the other boys and the Hashira blossom. And again, like Bryan said, this is the child of prophecy. He's come forward. There's something different about these siblings, right? And the world is changing. And so I do think that the line in the camera cut is intentional, but we don't know exactly what kind of love, if any, it might be quite yet. A love for humanity, a love for each other, a love for friendship. We're going to find out. And the journey is just as important as the destination. So I'm excited.
Absolutely. Yep. Definitely some good stuff to come for sure. I agree that there's a lot of foreshadowing happening for a lot of different characters right now. And I've always missed foreshadowing the first time. So excited to be watching it through again and being like, oh, I just caught that. Moving on to Tanjiro and Shinobu's conversation. I'm really loving how they're kind of setting this up to be a mystery of Tanjiro's Hinokami Kagura. You know, he clearly doesn't really know much about it other than it was a dance. And it's something that he hopes others will know because it translated so quickly into a breathing form that helped him, you know, kind of take the upper hand in a fight. But so far, we're learning that it's not a commonly known breathing form. So far, no one's known what it is. How do you like that this kind of like hidden power is being set up as a mystery that we will slowly solve throughout the show?
I love it. This is one of my favorite parts of Demon Slayer, is knowing that Tanjiro has this like special ability and that there's a deep history to it, but that the history has just been lost to time. And that there aren't many people alive who know, and that it's probably why Muzan is intimidated by him and why he and Nezuko are able to so successfully take on demons, even with the short amount of tenure that they have. I'm excited to see where it came from and who, if anyone, knows anything about it. And of course, the person that she recommends that he goes and talks to about it is my boy, our Flame Hashira. Although she does make mention like he might know something, but flame and fire are two very different things.
Yep.
But it's the closest you're going to get, so you might as well go ask him.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting distinction that they made. And I think it kind of sets up like more of the context in the world of Demon Slayer, right? That there are very specific ways of, you know, how the power system works. So I think that's a really cool detail that they have. But also for the overall mystery of this, right? I think it's really interesting because it gives us something to look forward to. Even though the season is winding down, the overall arching plot is not, right? Like we are still building towards some sort of climax here. And that's like the next step in this climax, is that we know this is something he's going to use again, right? Because it clearly worked for him. I mean, at least a little bit, right? And then this is something he's going to develop over time. So it's going to get better. He's eventually going to figure something out. But, you know, part of his quest going forward is to figure out what this means. And that's what I like here.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of world building with like these conversations, and I find it very interesting. And of course, the little bloop about Rengoku, he's coming. It's almost time for Emily's time to shine. Yay!
My brief moment in the spotlight.
No. You always have the spotlight.
Yes.
My son.
That's my
not. Okay, we're moving on.
Oh man. All right. Finally, at the end of the episode, we had a sweet Kamado sibling moment. You know that I love Nezuko and Tanjiro, and their sibling relationship is probably one of my favorite things in media. But we do learn that Nezuko has fallen asleep once again for what seems to be a long period, and Tanjiro is feeling a little bit nervous, but he kind of just is sitting there talking to her, promises to turn her into a human once again. And we hear her speak. And it clearly, like, Tanjiro heard something. So I found this kind of interesting. Do you think this represents, like, a bond so deep that they can practically read each other's minds? Or is it something else? Was it just, like, a cute little tidbit, not really something that we have to think about too much? But let's kind of dive into that.
I think with this one, right, like I feel like they've started to figure each other out. And I think this is the point where they're starting to get to that, like, a look can tell you a paragraph. I think, you know, as a viewer, I don't think it was actually Nezuko speaking to him. I think it was that like he finally had the confidence to feel he knew what Nezuko meant. I feel like this was his moment where he's like, okay, I'm starting to get better as a demon slayer. I'm starting to, you know, really tackle the path that I've set myself out on. Because I think also in this episode, he was like, you know, I need to start fighting, you know, stronger demons, start collecting more blood and get that to Tamayo. So I think like after solidifying his resolve, he's like, okay, like here are my next steps. You know, I have a goal and now I need to get moving towards it. And I think that's where that came from, is like maybe it was a subconscious generating like a little happy tidbit. I don't know, but I feel like it definitely was that look of just reassurance.
Yeah. It makes me wonder, like, yes, I think that their bond is extraordinarily strong because they've been through immense trauma together, and they're obviously like on this quest with a joined goal, or like again that destination. But at the same time, it's like, but it's not normal to just like hear other people talking in your own brain. So like either I think on a more realistic level, if we're suspending or rather not suspending any audience disbelief, like Tanjiro might be going a little bit nuts. Which is, you know, but maybe it's like a defense mechanism for himself, like even just to think that he's able to hear from her. Or if we're going to suspend the disbelief and there's like a fantasy element, like why would he be able to hear? Is this like part of her blood demon art maybe? Is it something that she's able to do while she's in this state of like catatonic rest? Or is there something about him that is also supernatural that is like connected to her as a demon? That could be interesting too. We don't really know. We don't know, but
I mean, we're kind of getting the sense that he has possibly some kind of supernatural abilities, considering he like trained with ghosts for a year or whatever, however long it was, you know, to call back to Sabito and Makomo. It's like maybe he is just like he's able to talk to birds too, like the ones that don't clearly speak a language. So maybe that's just something about him that is evolving and growing as he becomes a better slayer, is he's able to just kind of, he's sensitive to people's thoughts to the point of being able to understand them. Maybe. We'll see.
Possible.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're almost out of time, so we're going to move into our favorite moments, unless either one of you have anything else to add about the episode. Cool. All right. Well, as always, our favorite moments. I am going to go first. Now, I will say, I actually am going to say something. I had something written down, but I'm going to say something slightly different because I remembered about it. But I do want to call out Tanjiro's little boom booms as he's trying to like cheer his friends on was super adorable, and I love it. And I don't know why I love it so much. I just do. But I realized I forgot to call out this at all when Tanjiro and Inosuke are getting their swords, because we didn't really talk about that much. Specifically, my favorite moment was at the end when the swordsmiths are leaving, and of course it's like switched. Like Haganazuka was really upset when they got there, and now Kanamori, I think was his name, is really upset as they're leaving because of what Inosuke did. I liked that little like switch up there. But specifically, Inosuke is like holding on to Tanjiro's clothes. And I think it's just adorable. Like, he's just like, this is my friend, and I'm just going to hold on to your clothes while they run away and hope that you will save me. I thought that's how I read the situation, and it was adorable because, like, you know, I love their friendship. It's probably like my favorite, like, relationship outside of like Tanjiro and Nezuko's relationship within the show. So I just really enjoyed that little moment. I thought it was super sweet.
We didn't really call out the swordsmiths coming briefly in this episode, and it's partially my favorite moment too, although mine comes a little bit sooner, and it is Haganazuka. I love this guy, and we are all I'm not going to apologize for the person that we all become when that mask comes off next season. But if you know, you know. If you don't, you're going to find out. But he's so funny, and there's something about like the moment where the Raven comes, Tanjiro's like, Inosuke, they're coming with our swords, and then they go running out. They're all like delighted to go get their swords. Tanjiro's like waving exuberantly, Haganezuka, and then Haganezuka's like, oh, he's like,
I'm gonna
like, and he has like, and this is a swordsmith, right? So why does he have like a kitchen knife in and he's like so far away that they're like, what's he doing? And he's like charging at them with this kitchen knife, just like dead on. And there is something about Japanese like slapstick comedy like this that just gets me every single time. I think it's so funny. So by far, that was my favorite moment of the episode.
That's a pretty good one. Mine comes with Zenitsu when he's talking to Chuntaro. And he's just like, man, just existing is hard. And his bird is like, work harder. And he's like, are you even going to tell me that you're trying your right best? No. I mean, that's me on a daily basis. Like, I need someone to be like, you're doing it, bud. You're doing great, sweetie. But like, even if I'm just like barely dragging myself through the day, like it helps. And so I think that was kind of cool just because it characterizes Zenitsu in the way that we know him best, right? To be a little bit needy, a little bit like, I can't do this. But then eventually he took his medicine, right? And he was like, okay, I'm starting to turn the corner. And it's just really cool to see like that, character that we all root for, who's really just struggling with their life, finally kind of turn it around.
Yeah. Zenitsu's so relatable. It's frightening how relatable he is. Oh man. All right. Well, another good week, but we are out of time. So that's all we have for today. We're almost done with season 1. I can't believe we have gotten through season 1 so quickly. I mean, it hasn't even been quick. We started 6 months ago, which is wild. But as always, don't forget to follow us on all of our socials, including Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. We are at Hashira Half Hour. You can also leave a comment on any of our videos asking us a question that you might see us answer in a future episode. So don't forget to do that. Other than that, we'll see you next week for the season 1 finale. Umai.
Umai.
Umai.